Mr. Brandt, you have a right to speak to me before I sentence you. Is there anything you'd like to say, sir?
Yes, Your Honor.
You can do it from there, but it might be more comfortable at the podium. What would you like to tell me, sir?
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
Good afternoon.
First, I will apologize for disruptions with the WebEx, and I will ask the court to be patient with that because not necessarily all those people are on my side. They may be deliberately trying to disrupt.
I'm not holding you responsible for anything they do.
Okay, I will tell you that I have asked if I have followers, which I think is a little lofty, that if I have followers, then I would expect that they're behaving, and I appreciate that as well. And I thank you for opening the WebEx for this hearing. I think it's obviously an important day and an important question. First of all, I drove this plea agreement. I want the court to know that. I think that my attorneys did a great job. I think that they mounted great defenses. I think there are perhaps legally defensible questions associated with these cases. And I think that my need to accept accountability for the fact that words do have meaning was outweighing any of those potential legal remedies that I might be able to enjoy. And I would argue that I have shown in the last year and a half that I'm capable of towing the court's line. I don't, how many days did you say we had credit? 80. Well, I have 85 days of credit for time served. That reflects the fact that it took some time for me to revoke my bond and start earning that credit. I actually was in custody for nearly 6 months. And while I was in custody in Jefferson County, I took advantage of their behavioral health unit services. And I did that as a voluntary thing. I was completely compliant with that. We were driving towards a veterans court solution, which we did not seek here. I'm not sure why we did, but that's fine. But in fact, sorry. I was in fact accepted in Jefferson County for their veterans court program. They have resources available for me. They have educational resources available for me. And some of those resources could include law school, which I realize is a large hurdle for somebody with a felony conviction, but it's not an impossible hurdle. I took advantage of those programs. I was 100% compliant. I never even had so much as a verbal write-up the whole time that I was there. When I got out of custody a year ago, I sought the treatment. I sought Mr. Mears. Mr. Mears is in my area. I have moved out of the Denver metro area. In the time that I've been out of custody, I have achieved stable housing. I have achieved a property that I'm trying to build. It's 35 acres. I have achieved a much higher degree of mental health. At the time that these incidents occurred a year and a half ago, both of my parents were in dire medical condition. As Mr. Rudolph indicated, I went to Montana because my mother was on a ventilator. I do think that the mortal condition of my parents was a major factor. And I will also say that I've not discounted a substance abuse question. That's not a question. The question was not, did I have a substance abuse past? The question was, has it been addressed? And that question has been addressed. I've been sober for nearly 2 years now. So would I be objected to substance abuse treatment? I'm not sure. The reason why I asked to be taken off of the screenings was that they just, for 2.5 years, there was nothing there. I've worked to address that. I think that Mr. Mears indicated that that's a major hurdle. If you can't overcome that hurdle, then you can't move on to the next step. And I worked very hard to come over that hurdle. I'm proud that I overcame that hurdle. And in addition to my parents' condition 2 years ago when these occurred, that was an issue. I was finally achieving some level of sobriety and some restoring a sense of self-worth. I drove this plea agreement. I drove it pretty hard. I did drive it pretty hard, and I appreciate that you worked an agreement out with that. I drove this plea agreement because I'm at a stage in my mind where I need to apologize to my victims. I learned things today that I didn't know about the impact on my victims, and I'm sorry for that. And I was going to ask the court as part of my sentencing, if it were appropriate, I wanted to apologize to those victims in writing, should the court find it appropriate for me to guide that through the court for their approval. And now I have more information to do that with. I couldn't apologize to my victims. I couldn't show remorse when I still had a pending criminal prosecution. So we're not here today because I made case law ensuring that people can distribute literature in front of courthouses. We're not here because I made case law about what fighting words are as it relates to disorderly conduct. I'm not here because I've prevailed on 82% of my arrests, which are certainly indicative of misconduct at the police level. We're not here for that. We're not here because of my successes. We're here today because I crossed the line. I don't know if I crossed the line legally. My attorneys think that we have good defenses, but I think that I crossed the line morally. So if there are any followers, first of all, I'll tell you that they don't follow blindly. You heard from Ms. Springsteen, she doesn't agree with everything I say. If anything, I wish I had followed my followers' guidance earlier on. I wish I had listened to them earlier on. Followers aren't following blindly, but in the event that they are following blindly, I would hope that they take a look at my successes. I think I have made progress in a lot of realms. I hope that they model that. More importantly, I wanted to stand here and tell the court and tell the public who's clearly listening, there are lines in the sand. Those lines may not be legal lines. They might be ethical and moral lines that might pass as legal things, but they might not be right. And that's what I'm here to do today. I want to apologize to you, Judge Rudolph. I've not been allowed to do that until now.
And still, don't address your comments to him, address your comments to me. It's one of the rules.
Yes, sir. I would like to do that. I've wanted to do that. My lawyers would tell you that I've wanted to do that, but they've not allowed me to do that. I want to do that. I want the court to sentence me to write apology letters to my victims today, because I do have something to say to them that I think is appropriate. I do, and it's not about them, it's about me. I crossed a line. There are lines. I really hope that people take from this that you can negate 8 years of good activism with a single stroke. So if I had any followers, then I would assume that as of today, I probably do not really have that many. And that's probably appropriate because I'm not your champion. I'm not the guy. I didn't make it. I couldn't take the pressure. I didn't make it. So what I'm asking the court to do today, I have no objection to a lengthy probation period. I think that I can prove to the court that I'll comply. I've been complying for the last year and a half. I do acknowledge and recognize the severity of my words. Words really do hurt. They really do have a meaning. Even if it may be legal, it may not be right. And that's what I want people to take away from this today. I am standing here before you today asking you to allow me to continue my treatment with Mr. Mears. I think the fact that I'm almost completed with a Denver probation in one case is indicative that I can complete probation. I think that my compliance with pretrial services is indicative that I will comply with the court. I think that my compliance with the Adams County probation, where they've taken me from maximum supervision to minimum supervision, and even because of my UA history, they've removed me from drug screening. I would have no objection to drug screening, except that it is expensive. It's about 3 hours drive for me to do a test. And I would ask if the court is able to put me on probation, that at some point, once the Denver probation thinks it's appropriate, that it might be transferred down to where I'm living. I'd like to move forward with building my ranch. I can't make commitments to those things. I don't know if I'll be able to pay for it if I'm in custody. I can't commit to contracts. I'm now in a stuck state, and I'm ready to move forward. I'm asking the courts to impose a suspended sentence and probation, and I'm willing to accept my bitter pill.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Let me start out with a couple general comments. First of all, I've never heard of Eric Brandt. If he didn't make the sports pages of our local paper or the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times, I've not heard of him. It's been 2 decades probably since I've watched or listened to any local media. I don't know if that's good news for him or bad news for him, but that's the fact. The other general thing I wanted to say is I am, as I think all judges would be, a little bit uncomfortable being in this position where the victims in this case are judges. We are all trained to be hypersensitive about conflicts, and this makes me uncomfortable. But when judges are victims, only judges can impose sentences because only judges have the power to impose sentences. Could we bring a senior judge in here to have done this case? Sure, but it's the same problem. The senior judge is still a senior judge with judicial powers. The good news, I guess, is that I'm retiring in 4 days. And so unlike senior judges who will continue to be senior judges, I will not be a judge after April 30th. I'm not doing the senior judge program. I'm not doing any judging. So maybe this is sort of the best accidental solution to this intractable problem of judges imposing sentences when victims are judges. The third thing I want to talk about is these questions that have been raised by various people about different theories of criminal punishment. And our statutes, of course, require us to consider all the justifications for punishment, retribution, deterrence, incapacitation, rehabilitation. But I've said this for 30 years from this bench. Of all of those theories, retribution speaks to me more than any of the others. The criminal law is about this social contract that we've all entered into, and I want to talk a little bit about that. I don't want to go on forever, but as I've said before, punishment is really about the social contract. People who have violated the social contract have to pay to come back into the fold. And although we do have to pay attention to deterrence and incapacitation and rehabilitation, all of these theories have profound limits for me. In incapacitation, you know, murderers have the lowest recidivism rate of anybody, and forgers have the highest. Well, then why don't we send forgers to the penitentiary for life? Incapacitation is not a sensible, at least not a complete theory. Deterrence, I have no idea what deters and what doesn't. And there's something unjust to me about punishing Mr. Brandt because we're worried that somebody who likes him is going to do something. That doesn't seem fair to me. Rehabilitation, I have no idea about that. I'm not wise enough to know whether the sentence that I impose today is going to change Mr. Brandt's behavior or not. I've been doing this long enough to be surprised. People that I thought were going to change haven't. People who I thought were hopeless have changed. All I know is that the free will all of us has makes these predictions about dangerousness and about rehabilitation, about reoffending, really the worst kinds of guesses. At least for me, I can't make these guesses. So the only, not the only, but the sentencing theory that makes most sense to me is rehabilitation, is retribution. How much do I have to punish Mr. Brandt so he can come back into the fold? And on this point, you know, we're not just talking about the social compact our forefathers entered into in 1789. It's not, it's way deeper than that. And because I'm focus on retribution. I focus on the crime that bring people here. That's the only thing that gives me jurisdiction. What's appropriate to punish Mr. Brandt for what he did, not for who he is, not for what his followers do, not for what he did in other cases. This is why I don't pay as much attention to criminal history as some of my colleagues. Here's what he did in this case. He told Judge Rudolph's staff, and I know this has been said, but it's worth saying again and again and again during the sentencing. It is my thought that Judge Rudolph should be violently murdered and have his brains splattered on the faces of his children. There's much more to it than that, but I think that encapsulates it. I want to know who in the world thinks that that's okay. Nobody thinks that's okay, including Mr. Brandt.
It's not, Your Honor.
I'm not asking you if you think it's okay, Mr. Brandt. I know now that you know it's not okay. That not only violates the social contract, it not only violates the law, it violates 200,000 years of human evolution. We are all in this together. There are lines we cannot cross. It's hard for me to say this. I'm an unreconstructed libertarian at heart. There were aspects of this job that were hard for me. I don't trust the government in lots of dimensions. But there's one dimension that I not only trust the government in, but I've devoted my life to. And it's enforcing the social contract that says it's wrong for you to tell somebody you're hoping their brains get splattered on their children. And if anybody listening is not offended by that, there's something wrong with you. You are loons if you're not offended by that. And it doesn't matter how many YouTube videos or how much press you can get by being loons, you're still loons. And the widespread dissemination of lunacy does not change the fact that it's lunacy. Here's what makes it hard for me in this case. Mr. Brandt richly deserves the penitentiary, and I'm going to send him to the penitentiary. But and this happens sometimes, the person who gets sentenced is sometimes not the person who did the crime. They've changed, they've grown. Let me tell you, they always say they have. Whether they have or not, I don't know. I take Mr. Brandt at his word. I believe he's truly sorry for what he did. I was impressed that he talked about how this crossed a moral line. No kidding. I'd like all of you to think about how you would feel if somebody with real power, not fake, cowardly power, real power, like I have, said something like that to you with the power to make it happen. It's terrible. Those of us with real power, not fake, cowardly power, don't like imposing sentences. This is the worst part of my job. I get no joy sending people to the penitentiary, none. And judges who do get joy out of it should retire. They're psychopaths. Only a psychopath would get joy out of inflicting the kind of pain that I'm about to inflict on you, and I get no joy from it. And only psychopaths would get joy from inflicting the kind of pain on Judge Rudolph and these other judges that you inflicted. Judge Rudolph can take this. When I was thinking about this case over the weekend, I thought, here's what I should do. I should give Mr. Brandt probation on the condition that he and Judge Rudolph go 3 rounds in the ring, and I let Judge Rudolph pound you into the into the canvas. That's what I would like to do. But unlike you, Mr. Brandt, I can't do everything that I want to do. I'm bounded by the law. I'm bounded by the social contract, and I can't just say anything or do anything. So there are restrictions on what I can do. This behavior deserves the maximum sentence, which I'm not going to impose, for several reasons. First of all, it was quite meaningful to me to hear that Mr. Brandt has done so well in probation. He's a Navy veteran. That means something to me. That means he, at one time, knew that he had a social contract to defend. And I appreciate his service, and he should get some honor for that. Also, I think it was hard for him, because I take it that this does not come naturally, for him to come to the podium and say that what he did was wrong. There's probably nothing any of us ever does, other than sentencing people, which fortunately most of you don't have to do, that is more hard than saying we're wrong. And I appreciate that. Mr. Brandt, on each of these 3 counts, you're sentenced to 4 years in the Department of Corrections, plus a mandatory 2-year parole period. These sentences will run consecutive to one another. And I have 85 days pre-sentence confinement. Is that right, counsel? 85 days? Counsel. Counsel.
I'm sorry, Your Honor.
85 days pre-sentence confinement?
Yes, Your Honor.
85 days, we'll put that on count 1. Fees and costs in the usual felony amounts. Is there restitution?
Your Honor, if I could ask to reserve, please.
Restitution's reserved for 63 days. I know we have a jillion people on for the rest of my docket. I'm going to take 10 minutes and we'll finish it.